Hi everyone, my name is Andy Napleton at Napleton Film. I am a videographer from London, UK, and today I'm here with the Wedio community to give you an introduction to gimbals, and in particular the types of moves that you might use, when you might use them, when you wouldn't use a gimbal, and today we are also going to be using the brand new DJI RS3 Pro, but all of the tips that I'm going to be giving are applicable to all types of gimbals. So let's get started. I use a gimbal pretty much every single day on all of my shoots. The reason being is my particular cinematic style is very smooth, very long sweeping movements, and there are particular moves that I use every single time. We'll go into those a little bit later. But for now, I'm just going to give you an introduction on how to use a gimbal and how to set it up. So very quickly, we're going to take the RS3 Pro. And what's really useful about this one in particular is that it does have locks on all of the axes. So it's very important that the first thing that you do when you are setting up a gimbal is you balance it correctly. So I'm just going to very quickly do that for you now. So if we unlock these axes here and then just relock them again to get them into the correct position. And then I'm going to take my camera. So I'm currently filming on the A7S III, but for the demonstration purposes, I'm going to be using my A7 III, which is also my secondary camera. So we're going to attach that onto the gimbal now. The first thing that you want to do is you want to attach the base plate that comes with any gimbal. So this is very important because it literally is what connects the camera to the setup itself. So I'm going to move this over here. Just going to take this and slot it in at the top. You'll hear a very satisfying click, so that means it's locked in place on this axis. And now what we want to do is we want to try and balance it. So if I unlock the tilt axis here, then the first, in fact, very important, first thing you want to do is just make sure that you are ready to go when you are set up. So removing lens caps. I'm not going to be using a lens hood for this. So I want to unlock the tilt axis. So, and then what I can do is I can use this lever here, which is just going to loosen up this plate, which I can allow to slide forwards and backwards. Because at the moment you can see it's tilting back. So this means I need to just creep this forward a little bit so that it stays nice and level like this. The next thing I'm going to do is point it at the sky and see what it does. So at the moment it's still too front heavy. So the easiest way to do this is to unlock the tilt axis on the side here. So that's just this piece here. So I'm just going to loosen that up. And then all I'm going to do is bring it up. So literally pointing at the sky is the easiest way to get this balanced. So that means when I do that, now when I move it into any position on the tilt, it's just going to stay there. So just make sure to lock this up. So now I should be able to move it into any position and it's going to stay where it is. So that's the tilt axis done. So now I'm going to lock that axis because we don't need it anymore. Now what we're going to do is we're going to unlock the rear axis here. So if I unlock that, you can see it's not balanced at all because it just swivels all the way that way. So instead, what we want to do is we're going to unlock this one here. And I'm just going to slide it over in the opposite direction to the direction that it's currently tilting in. Now this gimbal is brand new, so that means that it's quite stiff. It will loosen up a couple of times after using it. Just to make it easier on me, I'm just going to pop that there, and I'm just going to move it gradually until it stops wanting to fall over. So I've gone too far. So the key when you're balancing a gimbal is micro movements, because if you do big movements, you're never going to get there. So that looks pretty good to me. So we'll lock that off. So now we are going to do the pan axis. So that's this bottom one down here. So I've just unlocked it with this swivel here. And the way that you can tell if this one is out of balance is literally just by tilting it. So you can see it spins, and that's not what we want. So if we unlock the axis there, and if we just move it back a little bit, so that's almost there. And we'll just go back a little bit more, a little bit more. And again, like I said, micro adjustments. There we go. So if I lock that one off now, and we are ready to turn it on and do a calibration. So something that is unique to the RS3 Pro, which is something that is really cool for me, is when you turn it on, it will automatically unlock all of the axes for you. So that means that now it's already good to go. Good thing about this is it means that you can literally, when you turn things on, you can immediately get shooting. Because I did have the RS2 before this, and it's a fantastic gimbal. I can't rate it highly enough. But in between shots, it meant individually locking every individual axis, and it just slowed you down. So if you quickly had to grab a shot, sometimes you could miss it. So now that we've got the axes unlocked and we're ready to rock, what we can do is we can do a calibration. So there's two ways of doing this. And this is very, very important, because without a calibration, the gimbal doesn't necessarily know the strength of the motors, so you can easily damage the motors. So these are, even though they're built to be rugged and they're built to be used every single day, just be mindful that if you do treat it incorrectly, that they will overheat, they will break. So just be very mindful of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press this button here, start calibration, and now it's just going to rock around a little bit while it does its thing. So we'll just wait for that to finish. It's going to make a few noises. It's going to, as you can see, it's just vibrating at the moment, just making sure that everything is correct. And then you will see on the back, there is a calibrating percentage. So it's almost there. We are at 75%. Okay, cool. So we're now fully calibrated. So this means that the motors know exactly what they're doing. So it's automatically calibrated the stiffness of the motors. So it's going to give you its optimal performance. But you can go into the settings on the gimbal and in the DJI app as well, which will give you more fine control if you know what you're doing and you want a specific look. To be perfectly honest with you, I've never really had the need to do that. The only thing that I've done is when I've been shooting is change the different modes. So that's what we're going to do now. All gimbals have the same modes. They all work in the same way. They might be called something different, but they are essentially the same thing. So at the moment we are on pan follow. So what that means is when I tilt the camera down, the camera stays level, and when I twist, it will stay completely level. So I can move this anywhere and it's not going to move, which is brilliant. So that's the mode that I use the most of. We're going to be doing a pull out. So the reason that you might do this is it's a really good establishing shot so that you can actually see where we are, what the bartender's doing. So we're at this really, really nice bar in South London. And it just gives us the opportunity to actually see everything around us. So we've got some really nice lighting and things, but obviously we're focusing mainly on the beer. So what I'm going to do is literally just grab my focus point, which is on the beer. And then Sophie, when you're ready, if you want to start pouring, and as she's pouring, I'm literally just going to start walking everything backwards. Yeah, perfect. So we've got that. So now that we've captured that one piece, so that's really good because now we can see everything. And now we're going to do the exact opposite. I'm actually going to push in to what we're doing. So, and again, the reason you might push in is because if this is a product focused piece, if I start out here, we can see where we are still, but then as I push in, we're like, okay, what's the focus? The focus is the beer. So if we start rolling from here, so Sophie, when you're ready. So just gonna push in. Perfect. So that's great. So now we've got two options, and it means that because I'm filming just normally at 25 frames, it just means that you're going to get this nice smooth action. Something also worth bearing in mind is my actual movement with the camera. So I'm not walking forwards, and we'll get to that a bit later with some of the other moves, but I'm literally just using my feet to rock forward. So I'm just getting my legs in a pretty ridiculous position, but it just means that then I can just keep nice and steady as I firstly push in, and then as I push back out as well. So I'm just going to record that bit again, just so you can see. So literally just a rocking motion forward and then a rocking motion back. The next one that I'm going to do is a semi-orbital movement. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock onto my subject here, and then I'm going to walk around nice and slowly. But the advantage with this kind of move is similar to the push in and the pull out move, is again, we get a little bit more of the background, because with a lot of your subjects, you'll find, especially in bar work, is they've got like a really nice setup behind them. So we want to make sure that we're painting the scene really well. So literally we're just going to do this, and then I'll go into a few more details about it afterwards. So when you're ready, Sophie. And again, if you just look at my movements as I'm walking around, it's super steady and super slow. And so I'm just going to go back the other way and just keeping my subject nice and in the center. Perfect. So that's really, really useful. And just on that, so with my movement again through that, I was ghost walking, which is something that a lot of gimbal operators use, because instead of slamming your feet down, you're literally walking on the balls of your feet. So you're just kind of going heel to toe really slowly, because it also eliminates that bob that you sometimes get. So that's really, really handy to do. Also, this is a good point to mention that on the RS3, I do have a side handle, which I use. This just gives you a little bit more stability, because I find that if you're holding a gimbal completely solid like this, it just means that sometimes you can have a little bit of extra movement. Whereas if you're holding something sideways, and you can use rings, you can use 2 handles on either side, but I just find it just gives you a little bit more control. And again, it's just a little bit more stable. So yeah, that's the semi-mobile to move. We'll move on to the next one. The next feature that I'm going to show you is called pan tilt follow. So what this does is this has now unlocked the axes at the top. So now when I move the gimbal around, if I do this, the camera's going to tilt. So it literally just means that you've now got more access to the tilt motor. It's not locked anymore. So we've just jumped behind the bar, because now we're going to get a crane shot. And this is going to be more useful when you really want to focus on the product, and especially things like the pouring. So what I'm going to do is literally going to hold this over my head. I've switched the gimbal into pan tilt follow, because it means now, looking at the screen on the side here, it means that I can really look at what I'm doing, and I can just literally just move down, and almost like you're following the flow of the beer as it's being poured. So this is kind of a really kinetic movement. So we'll give this a try. And this is the kind of thing that might take a couple of attempts, because it's just a little bit more precise. So if I go like that, okay. So when you're ready, Sophie. Okay, and then we're just going to come back up. Sweet. So actually that looked really good just off the bat. So that again is going to be really, really useful when it comes to product-based stuff, and just making sure that you're really focusing on what the bartender is doing, or whatever the operator is doing that you're filming. So yeah, that looks sweet. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so the next shot that we're going to use is a reveal. So we're just going to do a vertical reveal, where literally what I do is I've switched this to pan tilt follow. So I'm just going to start up here and then literally just reveal over the top. So this is great for intros to your videos, because it just gives you a perfect example of what the space is that you're working in. There's no particular rule to this, but again, with all of this, it's just about being as slow and as steady as you possibly can. So we are gonna set this up. There we go. So literally gonna start here. So start quite close to your subject, so you're not giving anything away. So I'm just going to use this barrier here, and then all I'm going to do is just very slowly just tilt up and over. And then I'm also going to do it the other way around as well, so we can have that option. And just going to do that one more time. And then what you can also do is you can try and do a little twist at the same time. So it just, again, just gives you a little bit more dynamic movement. So if we go down from here, nice and close, so you can't see anything from behind, and then literally out you go, and you get a whole view of the bar. I'm just going to do that again, because I just accidentally knocked the side, so that's not very good. So last time, we're going to go up and then twist over the top. There we go, and that's it. So like I said, really useful for just unveiling your scene, because especially when it comes to things like social media content, you really need to get into the action as soon as you possibly can. So now we've got an overview of the whole bar, and we've demonstrated the reveal shot. Let's move on. Another mode that I do use sometimes, I don't honestly use it that much just because it's not my particular style, but there's something called FPV. So FPV, or first person view, literally means that wherever you go, the camera is going to follow. The gimbal is going to follow wherever you are. So this is used a lot in music videos. So the reason that you might do this is, say you're looking for some Dutch angles, which is where instead of the frame being completely flat, it's slightly at an angle there. Rather than doing it handheld, you can get a really nice smooth action just by twisting the gimbal round. And we do also have another function which you can go into the menu and select, which is something called 3D roll, which always used to be called Vortex. So this literally is what it sounds like. If I go into this and I can then use the joystick, which is just on the back of the gimbal, and it just makes the whole thing rotate. Again, this is not a move that I use a lot of. Reason being is because of the type of work that I do. I don't do music videos, those kinds of things. The kinds of work that I shoot don't require something as extreme as this. This is a very specific look. So the next move that we're going to do is a vortex roll. So you've probably seen this in quite a few music videos or even product shots like this. So it's literally where you are pointing the camera at your subject and you're literally just spinning it around 360 degrees. The reason that you might use this is it's a really dynamic move. Use this move sparingly though, because obviously if you do use it too much, you might make your audience a little bit uncomfortable because it's a very unnatural movement. But again, with things like speed ramping, this can look absolutely incredible because you can just whiz in and out, use this as a transition. So let's give it a go. So essentially what you're going to do is, if we center the gimbal on top, and just make sure that everything is on and recording. So I'm holding this, positioning this under my arm so that I get a nice 3-point contact going. And then I'm just focusing in on the beer. And then all I'm going to do is use a combination of the vortex roll and a pull out as well, because it means that I can have a little bit more dynamic movement in there. So let's give this a go. So again, I'm just going to rock backwards on my feet. So just try and keep your subject in the center as much as you can and do your best. And away we go. Okay, cool. We're going to do that one more time. And if you can, it's going to be very difficult for you to actually get your camera to be facing up at the end. So if you go too far, that's better than not going far enough. So if we focus in on this and then go. Almost nailed it perfectly. But yeah, that's the vortex roll. And it just means that you get, like I said, super dynamic movement, but do use it sparingly because you're not going to see this move in many Hollywood films or anything like that. So it's a really good tool to have in your arsenal. But yeah, let's keep going. So I'm also going to talk about another feature of the RS3 Pro specifically, which is its portrait mode. So literally what it sounds like, it will spin the camera around. So now you can use it in portrait. I can't tell you how valuable this is, purely because we are living in an age now where Instagram and TikTok have really taken over in terms of video content, and everything is filmed in that vertical 1080 by 1920 cinematic format. So just something to bear in mind that it is always useful, and I do this all the time when I'm on shoots. If I've got the time to, I will always try and film a TikTok or a reel for the client. The reason being is you might have a big corporate client who is making you if you're making an advert for them or something, and having a little bit of behind the scenes is fantastic. It's even better if they can then transpose that into a different form of content. So that's a really good tip, because it means at the end of the shoot, you've delivered your final product. You can also say, oh, by the way, I also caught some extra content in portrait mode, which just means that you can put that straight up on Instagram, straight up on TikTok. So you could even ask for more money, or it means something that you could just give as a goodwill gesture. It's entirely up to you. But that's a really useful feature of the RS3 Pro. So obviously with a lot of camera equipment and a lot of gimbals such as this, they can get very expensive. So I would highly recommend, if you do have it in your budget, especially for a shoot, it is definitely worth renting, and that's where Wedio come in. So Wedio have access to hundreds of different renters who can provide you with thousands of different types of pieces of equipment. I myself am on there, and it essentially means that instead of having to fork out the money that you would require to actually own something like this, if you are only going to be using it for a very specific purpose, then it definitely is something worth looking into. I would highly recommend checking out the Wedio site, just because because this is going to give you an absolute abundance of information about all different types of equipment that is available to you. So now I'm going to tell you of a couple of different examples where you wouldn't use a gimbal. As great as it is to have smooth footage, because we all love watching stuff that's in 120 frames per second, it's beautifully shot, it's very smooth, it's very slow, that is not going to translate into a club scenario, for example. So I'm going to pop in some clips here for you to have a look at some club work that I've done where a gimbal just would not be necessary because it absolutely does not fit the vibe of what you're trying to capture. So when I've shot with DJs, when I've shot with bands, singers, anyone like that, 9 times out of 10, in fact pretty much 10 times out of 10, I'm not using a gimbal because it gives you that accessibility to zoom in and out, to make quick movements, to use whip pan transitions, those kinds of things, and do all of that in camera. Because if I turned up to a set for a wedding, for example, I would 100% be expected to bring a gimbal. But if I turned up to a DJ shoot and I start rocking out this gimbal, everyone's going to be looking at me like, what are you doing? And again, you can still use it. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying that when it comes to things like energy, kinetic movement, those types of things, you really, really want to make sure that you are capturing exactly what your client is after, because you don't want to shoot everything super smooth and then the client looks at it and goes, it's boring, it's too smooth, it's too soft almost, because that can just stress you out, and then before you know it, you've made a mistake. So with regards to what kind of projects these would be perfect for are weddings, corporate events, in-store corporate clients, anything of that kind of more upper echelon tier of work. The reason being is because more times than not, a client of that kind of caliber is expecting a certain type of product. So if you turn up to a wedding, as I said before, and you don't have a gimbal, you're going to look like an idiot, because unfortunately all of your work is going to be really shaky. It's going to be really there's going to be too much movement, there's going to be too much energy, and you give it back to the couple and they go, well, where's all the smooth, beautiful panning shots of the great hall that we were in where we got married, or where the reception was, or when you were just outside filming the grounds. If you're shooting a corporate event, the same thing goes. You are not shooting necessarily beauty shots, but what you are shooting is you want to make sure that the client their brand is best represented. So you might find that if you're, say, doing a cocktail bar, for example, you could get away with some handheld footage if you wanted to. But if you want to get an establishing shot of the bar, of the seating area, of all the drinks, of the staff, all of those things, you can get a really nice pan across this way, or you could be coming down, you could use a push in, you could use a pull out, you could use all manner of things that you could really only do on a gimbal. So that is something that's really worth bearing in mind. So if you do require a gimbal of any kind, please do have a look at the Wedio website. You can get them from as little as $17, which is fantastic, to be honest, considering these often cost £500 or more. As I've said before, there are multiple different use cases for gimbals. They are always worth having. It's always worth having, in theory, in your back pocket or just in your kit bag, because you just never know. The last thing you want to do is need it and not have it. So for me, it's an essential piece of kit, but it's definitely something that's worth looking into. So that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you very much to Wedio for having me on to teach this beginner's masterclass. If you do have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. You can find me on Instagram at a.napleton.film or at anapletonfilm.com. So thank you so much for watching. It's really appreciated, and good luck with your gimbal work, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.